A very good afternoon to all directors and management of the Leong-CDL group of companies, distinguished speakers and colleagues. Welcome to the CDL Singapore Sustainability Academy, and thank you for joining us today at the 11th Annual Sustainability Forum, jointly organized by the Group Corporate Secretariat Services and CDL Sustainability Team. This year, the forum theme is titled Forward Faster Towards Business Sustainability to Achieve Decarbonisation, Digitalisation, Disclosure and Defence, to reflect the urgent need for action towards a more sustainable future. To kickstart the forum, we will have Ms. Esther An, CDL Chief Sustainability Officer, to deliver an introductory presentation before we segue into the speaker presentation and panel discussion. We are honoured to have with us 5 really distinguished sustainability experts and thought leaders who have in their own way made an impact. Today's speakers and panelists are Professor Lawrence Loh, Director, Centre for Governance and Sustainability at NUS Business School, as our anchor knowledge speaker on key subject of interest to corporate leaders. Mr. Michael Tang, Head, Listing, Policy and Product Admission Head, Sustainable Development Office, SGX. Ms. Yean Cheong, Executive Director at SGTech Partner, Asia Pacific at Brand X Machina. Mr. Eric Lim, Chief Sustainability Officer at UOB, and Mr. Brad Weir, Head of Analytics Asia Aeon. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to now invite Ms. Esther An to keep us going with the first presentation. Over to you, Esther.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, for those who haven't come to our SSA, Singapore Sustainability Academy, a warm welcome. And this place is nothing but warm. It's a cool place. Net zero building since 2017 June. And then since then, even minus the almost 18 months lockdown, we have hosted 1,050 events and training courses with our partners, the Sustainable Energy Association at the back, and also the new partner, Global Compact Network Singapore. This annex was a new wing. We just opened on July 25th by DPM and SGTech. And why is it net zero? Is you can see here is a real-time tracker. For those who are an auditor, you'll be happy to see that we are very, very robust. And the top bar showcase from the renewable energy generated from our solar panel on the rooftop since 1st January this year. And the lower bar is what we have used now. So we have excess that all go to park with our CSM mall. Nothing go to waste. So we have maintained zero energy since day 1, June 5th, 2017. And similarly, the annex will be the same as well. We'll be aiming for net zero as well, and it is the green mark platinum level. So, okay. Our world is not sustainable. Although we've been working really, really hard on that, temperature has not gone down. In fact, over the last 9 consecutive years, every year the temperature has gone down. 2023 was supposed to be the hottest year on human record, but this year is set to break it. At the Climate Week in New York City 2 weeks ago, I was there. Actually, the climate agenda is such a big agenda now. Even in US, there are a lot of green ESG bashing, but if we mix with the people like from the businesses, leading businesses, NGO, innovators, and financial sector, all of them are still moving up the agenda of sustainability because there is a high cost for climate risk and nature risk as well. This is the World Economic Forum Annual Global Risk Report. The 2-year projection, you can see there's less green bar, there's a lot more like, cyber insecurity and all that, but the 10-year projection, green risk, nature risk occupy 5, almost the top all of the 10 risks we are facing. So climate risk is nature risk. They go hand in hand. You can't achieve net zero without conserving nature. And for Singapore, you have heard that 40 degrees is not impossible. And in fact, in April, 40 degrees hit almost every part of Southeast Asia. And if we don't do enough, our sea level can go up by 1.1 meter by end of this century. It's quite scary, honestly. Okay, Race to Zero is driven by many financial sector players, especially banks, investors, and even insurance company. That is also why we put together this panel and sharing with you the real world challenges. And they will also offer hope and solutions. So I'm going to let our expert speaker to share more, but Race to Zero is not going anything lesser. And for CDL, we have actually started and we have pledged for net zero since 2021. At Glasgow, we even committed to look at whole life cycle. Whole life cycles means you have to look at scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 reporting as well. So for us, we are tracking every year, and right now we are still on track, but there will be some challenges moving forward. So we will share with our subsidiary company as well. We need everyone on board to help us achieve net zero. And we started the journey in 1995, as most of you know about it. And at that time, very single-minded, conserving as we construct, more looking at the environment and the community, and more from the CSR angle as well. But moving forward, I'm not going to go through 30 years here, but there are some, very important milestones. 2008, BCA launched the Green Mark. Okay, it was actually launched in 2005 as a voluntary certification. And of course, CDL started our first green building called Savannah Park, the residential development. We call it Eco Condominium. That was 2003. So 2005, when the Green Mark was launched, we were not caught by, green firefighting. So we were really leading the way. And 2008, when they become mandatory, we were sailing across also, and we have quite a lot of really good projects such as the treehouse condominium and all that. 2018, we learned about what is scope 3, what's greenhouse gas, protocol and all that by submitting to SBTi, setting reduction target with science-based target initiative. And for here, this one is very difficult. It took us 8 months to achieve, to get them endorsed on our projection, the reduction target, because we are talking to scientists and analysts. There's no free coffee one. Just give them the data, project it, and convince them that this is the data that we want to achieve, and it will be ambitious targets that will drive change to our business model, look at innovation and technologies and all that to drive change. And 2015 climate change policy was very clear to actually summarize what we have done over the past 10 years. And 2019, our CEO pledged to support the UN Global Compact Business Ambition 1.5 degree. We were one of the 2 Singapore companies, and also one of the 87 companies to pledge this ambition of keeping rising temperature to below 1.5 degree. And today definitely is an important agenda. And of course, 2024, we look at nature positivity very importantly and very seriously. And we published our very first TNFD as part of our integrated sustainability report. And just to share a little bit on how this 4I and this now comes 4D now instead of 3D. So 4I is actually you must integrate your ESG into your business, into your corporate structure, into your overall, across all business unit, and from the board of director, senior management, mid-management, and all the way to rank and file. Everyone must be on board to share the same commitment. Innovation, adaptation is more important than mitigation now. Mitigation will not help you win the race. So we need to look at technology and new solutions. And that's why innovation has always been CDL's priority for over the last few years already. And we need to put money where our mouth is. Investment in green technology, green solutions, green practices is a must in order to drive change and move the needle. Last but not least, the last I is impact. Whether you do something or you don't do, there is an impact. So you need to be very transparent about it. And that is also why sustainability reporting has become such a big, important global and local agenda. And our speaker here from SGTech, Michael, is going to share more what is the latest and what is coming our way, and to help you better prepare for that. And then, of course, we have our value creation model. When we report sustainability report, it's not just about performance. It's not just about the past performance, but it has to be forward-looking. It has to be strategic. And that's why we look at both impact and value. How does it link to create financial value and investors' value for our company? And then last but not least, that the TNFD, we have added it this year, become the first Singapore company and Asian companies to report TNFD. And this is actually from ISSB when it was launched in 2021. they advocated that it should be one single standard for the whole world. It is really a tall order because it's so such diverse in terms of geographic location, in terms of sectors, in terms of economy. So one size fits all, I would say, is really hard to achieve. And now we are seeing that there are more efforts to so-called harmonize the major standards and also benchmark. So just look at this field is good enough. So no need to look at 600 others as well. So apart from ISSB, you have the GRI, most of you are familiar with. And then of course you have the CDP, which is focusing on climate and forest as well as water, and coming up supply chain as well. So TNFD, you have to start looking at it if you are not, because our business actually have very high impact on nature, and similarly nature have high impact on our business. And TPD is about transition planning, and so I think this is quite good enough to keep us occupied. And of course, last but not least is the greenhouse gas protocol, which I talked about it, SBTi. So this was actually announced in February 28. It was passed in the parliament that this one was based on the recommendation of SRAC, Sustainability Reporting Advisory Committee. A few of us who are actually on this committee working almost like 18 months to come up with a recommendation already passed at Parliament. So all listed companies is on the left-hand side. By financial year, next year onwards, we have to prepare everything. 2026 is your report that it has to come out and it has to disclose Scope 1, 2, and Scope 3. I will let Michael explain a little bit more. There has been a new announcement in September, just a couple of weeks ago. So for non-listed company, it's still there, but aiming at the big boy, 1 billion annual revenue with 500 million assets. So we need big companies to come on board, not just a listed company, to drive change as well, to help Singapore achieve the national determined commitment. So this one, September 23rd announcement, I will leave it to my expert speaker to talk about it, our regulator. But safe to say that we need to continue to move up our agenda if we haven't started. And well, our life is full of acronym, and this is actually from summarizing from 2002. We started with FTSE for Good Index and also UN Global Compact, the 10 principles, which have evolved into the SDG, 17 goals, 169 targets. Select those that are relevant to your core business, not to worry about, covering everyone. So we have the, CDP, very stringent, very robust, and high level commitment, and highly recognized by the investor as well. MSCI is like a gold standard recognized by investors. So we are very honored to have maintained that AAA level since 2010. Every year you need to go through an annual exam. So this is something that is very hard. And we need everyone, to be on board to help us to maintain very good level of ESG performance. And this is actually our 17 years of sustainability reporting journey. I'm not going through everyone, but safe to say that you have to evolve because the world is changing, the landscape is changing. We started out with something called the, just CSR report, reaching out to a bigger community. And then, from 2015, we look at value for the future, adopting the integrated approach. Then 2017, we went online, totally digital, no paper, no print report. We're also talking about value. Actually, we were talking about financial value earlier than ISSB. So you can see that all 17 reports are on our website. And since 2021, we have pledged to net zero. And you can see that from 2022 onwards, everyone is talking about zero in on impact, value, and nature this year. So we need to evolve and keep up to date, keep relevant. And of course, it has to be forward-looking, looking at scenario. We have done 3 rounds of TCFD, climate change scenario planning, and working on the 4th one. We will share more, but safe to say that you really need to look forward using a critical lens on what are the potential financial impact of physical and transition risk, regulatory change and all that, need a lot. And with all these, actually, this is our report card that is a very powerful report card that our banks will always ready to give us the financial support at better rate, right? And by the way, UOB also is one of the 5 companies that pledged to support TNFD. So we are buddy here that we all will support, protect nature, protect the climate. And in fact, this is really a very powerful report card that when we talk to ESG investors, analysts, and I'm sure Brad also impressive, right? So, green financing. So, banks, happy to see that. This is actually the data shared by MAS. From 2018 to end of last year, 10 times increase in terms of sustainability linked loan, social loans, and green loans. The lighter blue bar, the top one, is SLL, sustainability linked loan, which has been growing really, really fast. And corporates should really make good use of it to mobilize funds to help us speed up on green building, green financing, and green solutions, and deploying technologies and all that. So we rolled out the first green bond in 2017. That was really the time a lot of local banks were not too familiar as yet, but today they are very savvy and they have in-house experts to advise you on how to green your operations and green building performance and all that. So we have actually our finance and the treasury have been working very hard, and thanks to our CFO and Pipon also. So we have actually accumulated more than 9 billion, and this is very important for us to mobilize, technologies and applied solution, real action, not just talking, not just setting targets. So this is actually the so-called strategies that can apply to every sector, that you have to look at your performance, financial performance, and also how to link it to the natural capital, social capitals, and all that. Leadership and culture is very important. I mean, we are very honored that at CDL we report to the Board Sustainability Committee, and we have direct advisory support, strategic support, and also with CEOs, and exposed support for us to really take action on the ground and also get strategy aligned with the GET strategy. And we also need to look at, apart from the vertical, horizontal, we added a big circle around it because stakeholders are very important. And we don't own them. They are our contractor, they are our architect, engineering, supplier and all that. So, but we must engage them because their scope 1 and 2 is our scope 3. So we need to educate them. That's why we also launched a Green Bee project with ESG, Enterprise Singapore. And so we help empower, educate our supplier. Last but not least, strategic integration and value chain, and also transparency and accountabilities are very important. This is the expertise of our professor here, that he's going to share about anything about reporting, transparency, and accountability. I know I have passed the time. And last but not least, on the ground floor, come end December to first week of January, you will see a new initiative called the Eco Train, which actually embeds the idea of circularity solutions. One cabin of the decommissioned MRT train has been installed here already, and it is covered up by the hoardings, and it was transported here at past midnight 3 weeks ago, and we are going to refurbish it into a learning space, and library, and workspace for children 5 years and above. So look forward to inviting you to come here, that we want to train the kids that waste can be turned into useful resources, can upcycle and can be repurposed into something so useful. And the top of the cabin will be covered by solar panels, and it will be net zero. And everything here is about decarbonization, digitalisation, innovation, and also we need to engage the larger community to build a larger force for change. With this, I would like to pass the mic to our first speaker, Professor Lawrence Loh. Yeah.
Testing. All right, Mr. Chairman Greg, Ms. Esther Ang, distinguished leaders, my dear friends, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm very happy to be back here again at this very important and momentous forum. I guess the title for my talk today is quite indicative. Forward faster. I think it's a hint that I should do it fast because I only have 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is actually to focus, and I'm very happy to be actually among many friends that I know here. My talk today is actually quite focused today. If you can see, this is the first time I'm giving, within the 4-dimensional talk. So I will cover only one dimension. You can see Esther has painted 4D in a very excellent presentation. 4D, and of course, we all know 29 years of history in sustainability. 17 years in sustainability reporting. I don't have 17 years to talk about, but I will only go to 1D, which is disclosure. Let me first give the broad framework for my 10 minutes sharing. If you can see the screen, I'm going to cover the disclosure landscape in Singapore. I guess I should be walking the talk, so I will be blocking no one. You can see within the disclosure landscape in both governance and sustainability here in Singapore, of course there are many key initiatives, but I'll say the three most critical one, in my opinion, not that I'm leading all three initiatives here in Singapore, but because I'm actually the main person behind these three, but these were the three that is receiving a lot of attention from regulators, from investors, from shareholders, or even many other stakeholders. So take a good look. I'm going to paint some of the broader sweep in terms of the key pillars in the disclosure landscape. And of course, disclosure means that there's action. Undergirding every disclosure is actually a set of action. Disclosure is not an end in itself. It is definitely not sufficient, but at least it is a necessary condition for good practices. So you can see, number one, I will cover the governance landscape. Some of you will probably know there's the annual ranking. I'll talk about that. So this is the SGTI. And then I will cover the other disclosure, which is focused on sustainability. And it is something that I myself and my research center do with Michael from SGTech RegCo. And then, of course, very, very importantly, now that we have a new initiative, this is another disclosure exercise in sustainability. But more than that, we are going to look at impact. And this study is actually done together with UOB, and Reid is here. I'll talk about that. Okay, let me go to the first one, governance, just to give you some broad picture. I'm not going to drill deep. This is something that I presented to the industry every year. So this is just a few snippets of my August presentation this year at the Governance and Transparency Forum held at SGS. I just put in some of the key pillars. This is a study, a ranking exercise, assessment exercise that cover more than 500 companies in 2 categories. Of course, the first one is the general category, 477 companies. The other one is Risk and Business Trust 43. And I believe CDL here, together with Hong Leong Finance, Hong Leong Asia, and CDL Hospitality Trust. All these companies are in my samples. Okay, so let me talk about just some of the bigger picture. Later on at the panel, we can of course drill deep into each of these criteria. For governance, what I have constructed is something called the BRAD framework. Very aptly, and this is something a staple for all companies. So you can see BREAD, what does it stand for? Board responsibility, rights of shareholders, ESG, accountability, disclosure, and transparency. And within each of these pillars, there are actually many indicators, and I think all this methodology is actually accessible from my research center website. But suffice to say, going forward, especially from this year, we have turned this index into something more dynamic. In other words, on a continuous basis, will reflect all the latest changes, especially inclusion of sustainability. For many years, this index has been very static. In fact, almost exclusively a pure play index of governance. So now, going forward, since sustainability is going to be a very key feature of board leadership, the boardroom discussion, this will be continually embedded into the index. So you can see over the years, and this is the result this year, just along the 5 big pieces. you can see the relative score out of 100. You can see shareholder rights do very well. In fact, it's getting more than the A minus, but you can see actually board responsibility, transparency are something that I'll say this is something actually below even E minus. In any US high academic standard, this is C plus and C. So. Okay, so but of course we can later on, if you want to ask me any question about the specificity of what went right and what went wrong, I can share, but I just want to paint a bigger picture. And in my disclosure study of listed company, we also cover risk and business trust as a separate category because risk and business trust they are subject to other parameters and regulation. For example, they are collective investments, also they are additional thing. So beside the bread, we have very empty slice. So we have bread and a slice. It's like a plug-in, highlighting some of the key broader parameters of what make a good governance in both risk as well as business trust. Okay, so we have this call, and I just want to maybe highlight the latest score just released a few weeks ago in August 2024. You can see we have 477 companies. This is published in full in the Business Times, and I must say and actually congratulate CDL for being ranked during In fact, I think if you are ranked in the top 25 or top 30, you literally walk on water. I mean, walk in 4 dimensions. So like I must also say, Hong Leong Asia, Hong Leong Finance is within the top 30, and this is a very, very objective assessment exercise. I have no special rates to give to any company. So you can see there are some technical criteria. I have a technical team to do the objective assessment every year. So this is the governance side. Let me very quickly also show the risk and business trust. Among 43 risk and business trusts on our exchange, I must also congratulate actually CDL. You can see here it's met right within some of the very, very best. In fact, I don't know, is CapitaLand here? Okay. You can see Ascendas and CICT. Yeah, I mean, they are actually below CDL. But again, this is very objective. I have this nothing based on wings and fancy of any assessor. Okay. Yeah, so let me go on to the disclosure with respect to sustainability. And this is something that I do biennially, my research team in my research center together with Singapore Exchange, led by RegCo, and Michael here is my co-leader in this study. But the fact that all the scoring and all the assessment is done at the university, I'm very happy that SGS does not come in to give certain advice. So we can say it's truly independent. Okay, so this is some of the things we do biennially. Every 2 years we study the disclosure of companies in Singapore, and in between the 2 years we do a very special edition of climate. In fact, now we are actually finishing the climate study for 2024. All issuers, every company in the Singapore Exchange is actually covered. Again, if you want to read some of the clear parameters, you can come to my website. The entire methodology is transparent and disclosed to you. But these are some of the things we look for. Quite standard thing, very aligned with some of the requirement of our regulators. So you can see materials, ESG factors. In fact, this is exactly the 5+1 requirement of SGS in terms of the disclosure after 2017 and 2022. These are the 6 pieces of things we have to look at. And beneath these are many, many indicators. So let's look at it. This is very complicated. These are the 3 curves over the 3 series of study. The good news is the curve is shifting to the right. To the right, that means across the board, in terms of disclosure, our companies are improving. Shifting to the right means the mean has shifted to higher. Of course, the massive movement of companies to the right is there. So I have another even more complicated chart. For this study that was just done in November, we have included many measures in climate. It's the first time we are doing it in terms of addition of climate parameters into the study of disclosure. And you can see without the climate, we are doing very well. Because climate is still very new for many issuers, this is something that is a stumbling block for many companies. You can see the red curve is actually when you include climate. The blue curve is when we just do the common measures over the years. You can see the two curve. I think Michael will explain why this happened. Because actually we only introduced climate recently, and of course CDL is in the lead. And okay, these are some of the material ESG factors. I was actually trying to map this to what SB has presented in terms of what matters to CDL. But very, very interestingly, in Singapore context, many of the materials factors are actually social in nature. You can see number one is actually DEI, diversity. Of course, within top three, health and safety is very important. Smack in between is, of course, emission. This is the market level. But of course, I must say that it has to be contextualized to every company. But across the board, you can see perhaps governance is only covering one, which is stakeholder engagement. Most of them are actually social. Economic somehow featured number 7, but it's still there. So, of course, these are all done stakeholders in terms of sustainability. Okay, very fast. This one I'll just mention. I probably may elaborate at the during the panel. The board involvement has been improving very, very much. Okay, let me now go on to the third part. I will do it very fast because this is just an award that was just given up a few days ago. And this is the Sustainability Impact Awards, jointly organized by the Business Time, and also you will be led by Eric here. I think we are the key champion that you will be side. But in terms of assessment, I must tell you that my team interaction is only with the Business Time. We never talk to you about the assessment. It's that objective. I never interact with your chats directly except through Business Time. Okay. So this is the two category, individual enterprise, and within enterprise there are two subcategory. The big prize is actually of the year, leader of the year, impact enterprise of the year. These are the two big prize, almost like Nobel Prize when we announced this week. So I must say that I'm very happy. We have many criteria, and these are again available on the website. For the individual award for the leader, good governance is a prerequisite. Conceptually, a company can either excel in environment and or social. So if they have singular excellence in either social and environmental, then they are still okay. We have a very robust framework to assess. This is the framework for individual. Again, there are many key items, there are many items in terms of technical scoring, and then we of course have a panel of judges. This is the enterprise. There are many things there. Okay, and I must perhaps almost conclude now. In the latest 2024 awards, I'm very happy to reinforce what Esther has mentioned. The large enterprise award, the biggest prize that they went to city development this year. Please bear in mind, I'm here just as a messenger and no as the individual impact leader. The big prize for individual is Esther. So let me conclude by saying, just now I talked about 4 dimensions, 4D, and if I may actually end by adding a 5D, the 5 dimension. As a professor, I will probably grade city developments and the family of enterprises with another D, it's called distinction. Thank you.
Professor Loh, for your insightful sharing on disclosure. May I now invite Mr. Michael Tang to do the next sharing.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Tang from Singapore Exchange, I sit within RegCo and I look at policy products and sustainability. Actually, I wanted to stand behind rostrum, but Pastor said we need to walk the talk, so I'm going to take a stand just stand here and talk to you. Esther has given us a good lecture and update on what has been the new sustainability developments in last year. Professor has shared the scoring sheet. So usually what comes next is an exam, but don't worry, all of you has been continuously assessed, so we all know how you stand. So maybe I'll share the results of how Singapore companies have scored in disclosures on climate. And let's drill down directly to the specific elements of climate disclosure. Prof has given us an overview of how companies have done in sustainability, but let's look more deeply into climate because that's the newest thing that we've introduced, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But let's just look at TCFD. So our Singapore companies have been doing TCFD since 2021 for a few years now, and we've done studies with Professor Loh, and I've also, I think, integrated some of the other research done by other Singapore consultancies into this study. So there's a accumulation of all the results to show you the latest results that we have. So on TCFD disclosures, what we see is, let's look at companies that have at least one TCFD disclosure. So you know that TCFD is composed of 11 different recommended disclosures. So what is the number of companies that's done at least one? Well, it's grown from FY22 of 73% to almost all companies, 96% in FY23. So I think that shows really a good starting point for all companies. Every company has started on looking at TCFD. What about those that really scored at the other spectrum where they actually achieve all 11 indicators? Well, it's gone up slightly from FY22 of 7% to 20% in FY23. So still some ways to go in looking at the number of indicators. And what we have been telling companies is that it's good to get started, but you need to progress as the years go by. You need to increase the breadth as well as the depth of your disclosure. So let's go down there. Let's look at the breadth of disclosures. Companies that have disclosed their GHG emissions. So TCFD has 11 different recommendations, one of which is your exact Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3 disclosures. So how have our companies performed? So let's look at those who have disclosed at least one of Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3. It went up from 86% in FY22 to 92% in FY23. So I think it still shows decent progress, and I think most companies are probably doing Scope 1 and 2 because that's within your control. You can get the data more easily. So then let's look at whether or not companies are doing Scope 3 and how they're performing. So it went up from 20% in FY22 to 38% in 23. Again, decent, but probably we might need to pick up the pace on Scope 3 disclosures, recognizing that it's difficult. Then let's drill down even deeper. Out of the Scope 3 disclosures, you know that there's 15 different categories of Scope 3 emissions. How many categories are companies reporting? You can see in this chart, in FY23, we have about 60% of companies reporting 1 to 5 Scope 3 categories, 24% reporting 6 to 10, and then 16% are reporting 11 to 15. So I think, again, this is probably a representation of the state of the market that whilst companies have started on TCFD reporting, they've started collecting data on Scope 1 and Scope 2, but really on Scope 3, there's still some ways to go. Not just in reporting on one indicator, but also expanding the number of indicators that you do on Scope 3. So just to conclude the slide on external assurance, because that's, I think, something that Esther has been very passionate about as well, getting external assurance. It's gone up from about 6% to about 11%, so about from 30 companies to almost double, but still representing a small proportion of companies. Out of these 11%, I think almost 80-90% of them did assurance on their GHG emissions, and about 9% of them are doing limited assurance on their GHG emissions. So that's the state of play and how companies have performed. So now I think I'll give you the model answer on how to do better. And that really is the ISSB framework. I think you're probably familiar, but I'll just do a quick recap on what ISSB is. It is really the international standards that the global regulators have tried to converge onto. And Singapore is one of the batch of, I think, early adopters of ISSB. Seen the day after Singapore announced our adoption of ISSB, Malaysia said that they're going to do so. In the same vein, we've seen Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Japan also coming up with their own versions of these standards and signaling their intention to adopt ISSB. Just a very quick overview. So this is a cheat sheet that you can bring to your board meetings, but there's essentially two main standards that ISSB has promulgated. Firstly, S1, which is a general standards that should apply to all sustainability reports. Now, if you are an accountant, you're familiar with the accounting standards, this is really the foundational standards for all accounting reports, for all sustainability reports. Within this S1, it talks about the conceptual foundation, such as what is the definition of materiality. Well, it is the same as your financial reports, basically information that general users of financial reports would want to know. It talks about things like fair representation, what is your reporting entity, and what sort of information can you refer to within this report. Now, another general requirements under S1 is really where is your disclosure located. Well, it can be your annual report, but it should be, if not, if it's a separate report, then it should be at the same time as your annual report. You provide comparative information for the preceding year so people can see how you've performed. So generally, S1 is a conceptual framework that applies to all disclosures for sustainability. S2 is the thematic set of standards for climate disclosures. There are 4 pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. And being very familiar with TCFD, I'm sure you can recognize that this is an exact framework that TCFD has used in looking at climate disclosures. Of course, there are a bit more prescriptive requirements under each of these standards, and your staff looking at the reporting would be more familiar because they can look through all the different prescriptive indicators under each of these pillars. But as a general foundational framework, what ISSB requires is really TCFD type information with a bit more details. So what are the new changes that SGTech has introduced? I've talked about the move from TCFD to ISSB. The other move that was made is to start looking at requiring all companies to provide climate information on a mandatory basis. If you're familiar, when we introduced TCFD, we drew out a roadmap. So more carbon-intensive industries will need to do it on a mandatory basis at an earlier date, whereas those who are not can do it on a compliance-linked basis. With this move, we've made everyone do ISSB on a mandatory basis. But don't worry, there's some reliefs available. I'll go through them. Other primary components, I think Prof. Loh has talked about the 6 different components that we have, so such as your other ESG factors beyond climate, your policy practices, performance, others, risk management, your reporting framework, and your governance statements. Well, this we are going to make mandatory, so all companies need to provide all these indicators from FY26 onwards. So FY25, please focus on your climate disclosures. FY26, make it mandatory for the rest of your information. Reporting timeline, I won't spend too much time on it, but essentially at the same time. These are some of the release and resources available. I'll talk about the inbuilt release. Essentially, ISSB says that if you do not have sufficient information that you cannot get without reduced cost or effort, then you can omit some of this information. Or if you do not have the skills, resources, or capabilities to do some of this work, you can act on this, use these reliefs. ISSB has also provided a knowledge hub. There is also a Green Skills Committee looking at the types of skills necessary to upskill the whole industry, as well as grants available. I think more relevant for new reporters and for smaller companies. The EDB and Enterprise and Co have some grants available. Now, so this, if you need tuition, this is the slide on all the tuition available for ISSB reporting. As you can see, we really started rolling out all these capacity building workshops since last year, and it's still ongoing. I think I'll just highlight one of the latest one, which is on the use of ISSB and GRI. A lot of our Singapore companies are using GRI. How do they transition to ISSB? So last night, ISCA has published an illustrative guide on using the ISSB in conjunction with the GRI. So I encourage all of you to take a look at it. It's hot off the news, and you're the first that I'm sharing this with. So please take a look at the ISSB GRI guide that ISCA has provided. And SGX also plans to provide capacity building workshops based on this guide to our listed companies. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I now invite Ms. Cheong to do your next presentation.
Thank you. Well, it's a very tough act to follow Prof. Lawrence and Michael's presentation. Hi everyone, good afternoon. Well, in case you're wondering, what is the Trade Association doing here? Let me just give you a bit of an explanation. Well, I'm from SGTech, and SGTech is an association for the tech industry in Singapore. Our members are actually corporate members. And so that's why I think, thanks to Esther, her invitation, I think one of the things that we've spoken to and we heard from Esther as well as Prof. Lawrence and Michael, what corporate must do and can do, and certainly what you guys as Queen Bee can support right down the supply chain. So obviously, I'm also here to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that trade associations like ourselves are doing with the government. Right? Because I've always said to my team, right, that actually this whole thing about sustainability, ESG reporting, there's a lot of awareness about it. It's not that companies do not know. It's not that your suppliers do not know. A lot of times, especially those who are not that big, especially because they're not listed, so it's not yet mandatory, they don't know where to start. So this is actually where we come in. So firstly, for us, we have actually a list of, I would say, programs that provide a 360 degree to all the companies that we're helping. So what do we mean by that? And because today we're focusing on sustainability, I'll just dive straight into the sustainability side of things. We're quite, actually privileged that not only do we have Dr. Amy Kaur as our patron, in fact, we've also recently had Michael on actually one of our forums where we spoke about the whole idea of why when companies, especially your suppliers, if they do their ESG report, they are doing your scope 3, right? So we are very broadly evangelizing it. We're actually broadcasting, we're actually emphasizing the importance for companies to also stay competitive, to be able to remain relevant, especially if they want to bid for any of your business, right? So certainly from there, we've also started the journey by really talking to a lot of SMEs, right? And these are potentially some of your suppliers, right? And of course, they're also tech, they're also non-tech. And we started asking, why aren't you starting, right? Now, a lot of them go like, oh, it's not there yet. We still have time. Oh, we don't need, we don't do this. So we had all this. And of course, we also spoke to some of our bigger tech members, certainly people like yourself who are Queen Bees. And they are also basically saying that, oh yeah, some of my suppliers, they're still not on board. We keep saying, but then they said that, it's not mandatory. So in all this chatter, we basically developed a kind of a series of programs. So again, like I said, this is not to sell you the programs, just to give you an idea that some of the things that we're doing for SMEs. So we have a guided program, which basically there is obviously the essential modules and elective modules. So we mapped as much as possible to what some of the things that Michael has shared and also the evolving changes to that. So of course you will see that in this case, we have things like the essential or elective. Now what we would love to hear from you moving forward is that obviously if there's some changes, if there are areas that we should actually focus on supporting your vendors, your suppliers, then that's obviously something that we love to do, to relook, redesign and finance our programs. Then obviously we also, and this is one of the very key points to some of these SMEs that we're helping, a lot of them are actually going to argue that they're not doing this because they don't have capabilities. Their people are not trained internally to do that. So as a result of that, we've also coupled our programs with the kind of career conversion which some of you may be aware of, that the government is actually supporting in actually training grants. So that's the thing that we also piece together for them. Last but not least, we publish things like this. Again, this is also something that is actually, please feel free to scan the QR code. It's for all companies, not just for SMEs. This resource basically details the kind of skills that will be essential for your team, whether you're upskilling, reskilling your team, or whether you're hiring new roles. So please feel free to download. So lastly, as I mentioned, we have this Scope 3 focus group. So this is also an open invitation if any one of you want to be part of that focus group. So our focus group comprises of the bigger organizations like yourself, and also SMEs. And the whole idea is to really drill down to the whole idea of procurement, right? What are some of the essentials, considerations, or criteria from that perspective? So that's kind of really me, my 5 minutes of fame. Thanks, Esther, for having me. And happy to answer any more questions later on during the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your sharing. And now invite Mr. Eric Lim for your presentation.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much. I thought what I'd do is kind of give you an inside out look on how a bank thinks about sustainability, what we think is bankable, what's working well, what some of the challenges are. So you can kind of bring it back into your conversations as well. Just to start with how a bank actually thinks about sustainability. I know all of you look at a bank and go, sustainable finance, green finance. Actually, the way we think about it is in terms of capital stock from a high carbon economy to a low carbon economy, right? And we realize that every company has assets that start on this side of the business model, but over the next 10, 20, 30 years, need to transition over to the right side. Now, when you think about a bank has different time frames in terms of how we build a book, right? And so a lot of what we want to be able to finance is stuff that is commercially viable for you guys in the next 1 to 5 years, because that's where you have your cash flows and we get our money back, right? There are, we obviously watch very carefully some of the more cutting edge technologies that may be 10 to 15 years out, but generally for a bank, that stuff doesn't look bankable to us, right? So it's very important to understand, and I'll get to the technologies in a bit, how we think about it. The second thing we think about a lot is no single company, not any one of you, not any one of us, is going to be able to pull this off, right? And so there are actually 4 key ecosystem players that need to be able to pull that weight in a coordinated manner. First, governments and regulators. Ta-da, right? That's why Michael is here, right? Really having the right kind of policies that encourage and incentivize the journey towards sustainability, right? The second critical one is real economy. Real economy from 2 perspectives. The technologies we need in the real world to decarbonize, and the companies to be able to implement this at scale for impact, which is what Prof was talking about. The third thing we really need is the financial services industry, right? Be it institutional investors, be it funds, be it banks like us, right? Our job is to help finance that transition. And finally, actually, it's an unspoken one. When I first built this chart, I actually had under consumers, I called it voting electorate. And my team told me, Eric, please don't get shocked. You can't put the word voting electorate, just change it to consumers, please, right? And so I changed it to consumers. But the point of this is the individual buying behavior, the individual responses and preferences will also start to shape. Because what individuals want will influence what real economy will be able to deliver, which then influences what we're able to finance up to finally a community and society, right? Now, where do banks come in? I just got a 5-minute mark, I barely started, right? It is obviously this big amount of capital stock that needs to be financed. Okay, so you would have heard of banks talk about net zero targets, right? And you'll be sitting there going, what the hell is this net zero target all about? Very simply, it's simply the bank saying there are sectors that matter to the economies we finance, and there are sectors that matter to our portfolio. And how do we ensure in the highest impact, most critical sectors to the economy and to us, we have a plan to move the emissions of these sectors we finance towards net zero. Now, the important thing to know, and the reason I say that I bring this up, is some of you may be sitting here going, banks are gonna cut us off, right? Because we are not doing well. The reality is banks think of this as supporting our clients on the transition path, right? And at this part, I will tell you a dirty little secret. There are 2 points, a 2030 point and a 2050 point. If you ask just about any serious sustainability professional, and I'll see what Esther says in a bit, we know the 2030 target is extremely difficult to reach. Okay? If you ask me in my private moments not to be quoted, I would almost say it's insane. You don't hear me say that, right? Now for 2050, we are actually a lot more hopeful about getting to net zero. And the difference between the two is we realize when the world is trying to organize itself towards net zero, it's a messy business. We need a lot of the new technologies that need to come online, companies to scale, right policies. And in the short span of between now and 2030, the world's not very good at organizing ourselves. However, when the technologies, the material sciences, the energy systems that we need to get to 2050 start to come online, banks, our job is to bring huge amounts of financing at scale, very cheaply, I see you looking at me, right? In order to be able to implement towards net zero. Okay? Now, one of the things we're starting to see, and I was just at our UOB MD Town Hall this morning speaking to my 150 MDs. When we started this journey in 2020, this $50 billion book that we now have was just about 10 billion. My senior management was telling me, Eric, we're not an Angmo bank, right? Be careful, we have to be very pragmatic. My bankers were telling me, Eric, you need to be careful, we're going to end up cutting ourselves off at the knees and we won't be able to compete and do business, right? Now in the third quarter of 2024, the book has grown 5 times to 50 billion. And it's not unique to us. You look at any commercial universal bank out there, these are the scale of growth numbers you're looking at, okay? My bankers are now the ones coming to me going, Eric, this is a competitive advantage, we can help our clients, how do we do more? The reason this is happening is because our clients, all of you in the room, understand the medium to long-term competitive imperative and advantage of going sustainability, but at the same time, we need to balance the commerciality of it. How do we be practical today, but future resilient for tomorrow? So this is the one thing I will tell you. Number one, if you're finding the journey hard, you're not alone. But if you're making progress in a very pragmatic, quarter by quarter, year by year way, you are right at the front of that surfing wave where that energy is there. And it's not only in real estate, although real estate still dominates, you're starting to see this diversification across all sectors. It's not only in Singapore, we're starting to see this diversified across the region. One more minute. And it's not only in green loans, Esther talked about sustainability green loans. Okay, so I'm going to skip this page because the point I want to make is it's scaling, it's doing well. Okay, I want to close with this page, right? This is the Come to Jesus page, which says a lot of stuff is working. It's great, right? We see huge energy in real estate. You guys are familiar with this. Renewable energy and EVs. However, all is not well in the kingdom. In order to be able to scale further, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to happen. In real estate, we talk about embodied carbons, low carbon steel, cement, etc. That needs to be affordable. Renewable energy, we need smart grids, we need battery systems, and in EVs, we need more infrastructure, etc. On the right-hand side, you see a whole bunch of things which are struggling to really scale. Now, my point on showing you this is your bankers are not confused about this. Do not approach your bankers from the standpoint of, we have to be only green, otherwise they're going to start cutting financing from us. That's not the conversation your bankers will have to. Your bankers can see this landscape from how we manage our portfolio. We know what's bankable, we know what's practical, we know what's struggling. Have that conversation with us, and again, access the best financing you can at the best rates possible. Yes, yes, right? So with that, I'll just kind of close up the conversation, and I'm sure we'll pick up more topics at the panel later. Thank you.
Great, and thank you everyone. Big thanks to Esther to extend the invite to Aon. Had to wait 11 years, but much appreciated. I'm backing up the 5 talks, talking about the role of Aon as an advisor on the insurance side, how we help our clients, and then when we talk about our clients, we're talking about buyers through to insurance companies, through to reinsurance companies. How we help them be sustainable and protect them from a climate perspective. Now, first of all, just to set the scene, you might wonder why climate is so important, or change of climate is so important in the insurance sector. Obviously, we are very familiar with uncertainty. We're very familiar with the impacts of climate, because that's our job. We're there to protect and give you stability and economic progress. But just to set the scene very quickly, we know temperature is changing. We've heard about it all the way through. We know effectively what we're seeing as a result of that is an increase in losses from catastrophe events. So floods, typhoons, any climate-related event is increasing. But the graphic on the right actually shows us the increase in billion-dollar events is on the rise as well. So this is very large, very extreme events. And the reason that's important is because it brings great uncertainty to those who are providing capacity into the insurance market. Now, the graphic in the middle is just to add a little bit more flavour around that. It's a little bit complex, but basically what it's saying is, as the climate is moving and going to a hotter house or a hotter world, what we're seeing is that tail risk of extreme events is becoming more volatile and more hard for us to understand. That brings uncertainty into those that are providing capacity from an insurance or reinsurance side of the business. Therefore, we need to understand that the best we can as we look forward to ensure we have sustainable insurance into the future. So just as a overall, how does that lead into what we do as an advisor across the space? Fundamentally, I put down 5 key things in terms of where we get involved with supporting our clients around climate, what we call climate risk advisory. In 4 across is risk transfer. So that's the key thing that we're doing here. We're looking to protect you and transfer your risk and volatility out into a market at obviously an economically and capital effective way. To do that, going back to the left-hand side, a big thing about what we do is understand the data, the research, and present modelling and risk modelling. So you can understand what you're exposed to today, what you're exposed to in the past, and what you'll be exposed to in the future, and how that will play into the risk transfer mechanism. Beyond that, we dig down into what we call asset resilience. So this is helping you understand at asset by asset level what you currently do today and what you should be thinking about in terms of resilience mitigation under a future climate. Then we also look at supporting, obviously, in terms of reporting, so sustainability reporting, TCFD, ISSB, etc. And then on the far right is talking about some of the things where we're looking at the change in climate, how can we bring new capacity into the insurance and reinsurance market. Now, what I want to touch on just very briefly is a few of the things that we do. Bringing data, research and science to our end users is key. So we build platforms, and here in Singapore we have a climate hub. We're in our innovation centre where we develop tools, bringing together global climate models down to local scale to help people understand for their portfolio of risk what they're going to be exposed to today and what they're going to be exposed to in the future. And this is across a number of different perils. So this is going from chronic perils through to acute perils. And for those of you who aren't quite sure what I mean there, chronic perils are the more long-term burn. So things like heat stress, extreme rainfall, freeze or wildfire, versus acute perils, which might be more like a flood or a cyclone. And they impact you in a different way. Acute perils give you a sudden catastrophic loss. Chronic perils give you more of a slow burn, so change in heat stress or change in drought or water supply might be more of an operational or human capital perspective. So we provide tools like this to help analyse what we have. And you can drill down right into individual risk level and try to understand what's my biggest challenge at this location. Is it heat stress? Is it freeze? Is it change in flood? Is it change in cyclone? And what can I do about that? So I just put on the right-hand side some of the key things that people think about. So we can look at economic and hazard impacts. We can look at mitigation for target risks or resilience that we need to deploy. How is my operations going to be affected on the ground? Do I have a business interruption or business continuity challenge into the future? Is there a potential impact to the insurance, and is there a potential impact on people? Now, one of the key things we're seeing changing in the insurance space is that people are moving towards what we call risk-based underwriting. That basically means that insurance companies are analysing in-depth analysis of individual risks right up to the portfolio level to understand what's the key impact and how much should that be priced. In the past, this process was more driven by market forces or the need to grow as opposed to technical risk-based underwriting. And I've just given one example of a product here, which I won't go into any detail. But extending to this, we're also seeing clients look at things like forward-looking climate, but also emissions in terms of scope 3 analysis and disclosure. So we help people report right from that current climate, future climate through to disclosure. And just to finish off, I want to talk a little bit about how you as a buyer of insurance can differentiate and why it's important to differentiate yourself in the current environment we have where climate is changing. 3 key things. 1, if you're engaging, you need to engage early. Insurance companies, because they're moving towards risk-based underwriting and analysis, you need more time to develop your story and to be with them. 2, use the tools that are available. Climate models, catastrophe models, they're all used and they're all available. Use that to understand what risk you face, both at the risk level and the portfolio level, and think about how you can articulate your risk differentiation in terms of what those things will show versus what you're doing on the ground. There could be a disconnect between you know the risk better than potentially the insurance company. And with that, I'll close off.
To invite all the speakers, please take your seat at the front for the panel Q&A. Please also take note that today's session will be recorded and a recording will be posted on our CDL Sustainability YouTube channel. And this panel Q&A will be moderated by Ms. Esther An. Okay, now.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the patience. I know a lot of information overload. We will try to make this discussion very dynamic, but I want to give a little bit more time for Eric first because you skipped a few slides just now, and but what you share is very important. You know, we have a lot of director and finance people here. You know, it's talking about money. You know, how can we really invest in sustainability that can really help us to bring out the ROI in terms of like borrowing cost? Yeah, so maybe you want to like finish what you missed out just now?
So a couple of things I would say, right? Number one, it needs to be core to the business strategy. Because at the end of the day, if we're doing a bit of things on the side, number one, it's not going to really move the needle for your business strategy. And number two, as you're talking to investors and your banks, they can tell it's stuff at the periphery, right? And you can't scale it anyway. The reason I was going to show the various instruments, and I'm sure you guys are already familiar with it, is there are a whole range of different instruments that can support you on your sustainability journey. Green loans are very straightforward, right? I have a green asset, very easy use of proceeds type structure. But even if you don't have a green asset, but you have a strategy to be more low carbon in your operations, reduce energy usage, or be more nature resilient, there's a whole range of high quality sustainability linked type financing that you can access. The third thing that folks aren't really picking up on is as you move raw materials around the ecosystem, you can also access sustainable trade finance. Because if the use of those raw materials is for high quality decarbonized type assets at the end, that can qualify as well. So there are multiple instruments that can be deployed in order to have you recognize that your activities are green. One of the things that we're seeing is really struggling is transition finance, right? And that's a whole different ballgame. If you find that you're struggling to have a conversation on transition finance, how to think about it, I will give you the insight. A lot of companies are actually pulling off their transition using green as well as sustainability linked loans in combination, right? So if that's what you find you're doing, it's fine. Just have a high quality strategy that is impactful and meaningful to your business model.
Okay, wonderful. Prof, we'll come back to you now. Okay, when we talk about ROI, I mean, we are business, okay? We have to look at the value. And just now we heard all the sustainability, but we are not academic. So how do we really justify the time and the efforts that we put in, for sustainability reporting? I mean, I'm a fan, but how do we convince, others, businesses to, get onto the, on this train to fast forward adoption of good practices?
Okay, I think this audience probably don't need any more convincing after your very eloquent delivery. But let me put things in perspective first. I think there's a lot of, I would say, sometimes skepticism about what we do in sustainability, whether it really matters or not. And let me highlight some evidence that I personally have done in terms of my technical research. But to put it in simple terms, over the years, I have done certain investigation into Singapore listed company. And in general, I think that's very good news. I have found a positive and significant relationship between your sustainability as measured by your disclosure versus financial performance. So this is one broad straight finding. But just recently, a few months ago, I started to go into certain sectors. So I actually, with my master's student, did a dedicated study into palm oil industry, palm oil. And what we found is actually the reverse. We found that if a palm oil company is more sustainable, it leads to lower market valuation as measured by stock prices. It is actually a plus. So with all this framework, what it sets me thinking, and I'll stop after this, is that, somehow, when we talk about sustainability, we always talk about ESG. And now I think there's another alphabet which is actually missing. We need to integrate something into our conventional framework of sustainability, ESG. And over the last couple of years, I've been actually moving around talking about, say we should actually, to put it simply, ditch ESG and call it EESG, economics, the missing E. And the missing E is not an afterthought. It must be well calibrated and integrated into the same calculus for sustainability. I spoke to just last month a company from Indonesia, Astra. All their business divisions are in mining, in manufacturing, in palm oil. They're actually bleeding in terms of finance. And when I spoke about ESG, they were very, very happy. And in fact, I'm very, very happy too, because at the award for the Sustainability Impact Awards, Mr. Sherman in the video also mentioned about EESG. I think we're all singing the same song. We should actually now include financial performance together into the same equation, same specification for sustainability.
Yeah, thank you. Michael, board's role. Okay, over the year, we can see that board of directors are also required to step up on the knowledge of sustainability, and also there are new training coming up. And what do you see that the role specifically that director can really push and accelerate change and work with the management to help companies to create greater performance in ESG, and most importantly is how do you create the financial value that we want?
I think ultimately, with Sid, I've been throughout all this time, sustainability is for business. So really looking at it as part of your business. Not really looking for box ticking, we're not looking for just a report, but really maybe a change in the way that you're taking about your business. And I think that really extends beyond sustainability to really looking at whether you are creating value for your shareholders, of course, but also for other stakeholders. And I think boards are the best people to really drive that conversation within the company and to decide then what should the change be within the company in order to achieve that value creation? I think we've seen some bigger Singapore-listed companies really go through this transition and business models really transitioning out of, say, oil and gas into renewable. And I think financiers are, of course, also rewarding such I think behavior and transition with cheaper loans, sustainability loans. But more importantly, I think because you are the ones who know your business best, you know where the change should occur. So I think thinking a bit deeper about these issues and really from the business perspective, what would be most helpful. Then I think if you maybe drill down to the details on how do you get started on this, maybe two parts. I think really one, looking at your board structure, who's really responsible for this. I don't think there's a fixed model. I think it depends on the business of the company, who you have on your board. Is it a dedicated committee? Is it tagged on to an existing committee? Or is the whole board responsible for it and is brought up for the entire board's deliberation, say once a year, twice a year, at strategy sessions, for example? I think it depends on your company, but I think looking through that structure is one, and the other is of course on the management. And who do you have on the ground to carry out the directions that you've set for the company? Is it a chief sustainability officer? Is that sitting within the finance department or health and safety department or communications department? I think again, the jury's out on what's the best, I think, model. But for sure, you need someone dedicated, you need dedicated resource to run this. I think maybe on the ground, these are two specific things that the boss can look at.
Yeah, for I think most listed company or big corporation, they know it is no longer good to have. You just look at the regulations, look at all the technicality. You really need dedicated and full-time efforts to do it. But a lot of SME, who are actually our supply chain, will be still quite resistant. In fact, the last 3 months we've been working with a lot of SME. The first thing they said is that I just want to know that how I can maintain my position, my place in your procurement panel. Don't tell me about too many things, So you deal with Yean, you deal with a lot of SME. Is this something the mentality is changing, or you still feel that the Tauke also say that I don't know lah, you just tell me how I can maintain this procurer,
I think certainly the urgency of doing it is actually stepping up now. So it's kind of heating up. But when we first started this journey, definitely a lot of them are going like, oh, let's wait and see. Let's see whether we need to. Right, but I think that the ones who are willing and really focusing on that, they do have this challenge, as what Michael has alluded to, is actually also lack of talent. A lot of them, even if they say, I want to hire someone to do this, I don't know, I can't find, right? So there is a few layers from the SME perspective. So there is like, even working with the willing, there's some of these fundamental challenges that we have to actually address with them. So of course, getting them to actually have that first step to getting an ESG report, right? Now we do have consultants, we do have programs like what I just shared earlier that can actually help them to get to that first step. Then obviously for us, is our message to big companies like yourself is help us pressurize them because if they want to remain on your panel, they need to actually support you in your basically your responsibilities for your reporting. Right, so I think this is becoming very real. In fact, I think very recently we've kind of seen a little bit more, I would say, response, because we've been talking about it for a long time. I mean, in fact, I brought my sustainability team here. They're the mastermind behind it for 2 years. We keep talking about it. We have 1 company, 2, right? So recently there are those who came on. But when they came on that same topic, so who's going to continue? So even if because our first report, we have a consultant, I know. Then after that, they were like, then who's going to continue? And how do we deal with all these evolving changes? So I guess this is kind of one of the really big challenges of SMEs, because they're time poor, they're resource poor, they're lack of talent. So I think this is not something that we can change overnight. But this is certainly, I would say that from an urgency perspective, please continue to actually spread that message. Then obviously for us from ground up, this is where we work with our government stakeholders, public sector stakeholders, to try to say, how do we actually firstly build capabilities for the SMEs from within? How do we make sure this itself is a sustainable practice? right? Because they get the message, they know, right? They will miss out. So the economic side of it, I think it is ringing very loud to them. But it's actually getting it started and continuing that practice. I think that's the challenge right now.
Eric, back to you. UOB has a very robust SME program, also engagement, education, and also financing. And I saw your slide that you also have some mid-size, not the with 100 and below, but those like 300 or even half a billion. I saw U Energy, I saw CBM, our own subsidiary. And how do you find it in your journey from the financier? You're not just enticing them with the carrots about financing, but you also have an education program. And recent years, UOB have really stepped up engaging the media to promote the agenda. Yeah, so maybe you want to share a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a really good point. One of the things we realized as part of this journey is our traditional role as financier wasn't enough. We had to step in a little bit more as solution provider and in certain cases, advisor, right? And the reason for this is when you think about sustainability in its fullest form, it's like trying to lift 100-kilogram barbell. Now, if the person or the company in this case starts out never having lifted anything more than 5 kilograms, and you ask them to lift 100-kilogram barbell, it's asking them to do the impossible. However, if we think of this as a journey, the time series can solve a lot, right? So you lift 5, you lift 10, you lift 15, and the foundation of every year's capacity building and learning, it forms the foundation upon which you can build more. So one of the things we realized was we had to help our clients get started, right? And through the passage of time, they would begin to get stronger. Now, the early question was, how do we get them started, right? Financing itself, we've got all the instruments, but at the end of the day, it was really helping our clients understand what their stakeholders are looking for, what the supply chain is looking for, and then being able to reduce it to, the concept of net zero. Let's be honest. How on earth does a normal human being running a business process the concept of net zero? Right? They process it in terms of what do I own and what's the emissions? How do I measure that? How much electricity do I consume? How do I convert that into emissions? And when I think about my supply chain, which parts of my supply chain are most critical for me as a business owner to keep intact? And how can I bring them along on the journey? So, kind of reducing it into economic activities, operational activities, that when you add them all up, become coherently seen as a sustainability strategy. And then being able to wrap our solutions to say, these activities we can support with U-Drive or U-Energy or U-Build type solution to be able to then bring the financing bit of it. The financing bit is the easiest part. I mean, you guys know, right? You'll have banks tripping over themselves to lend you their balance sheet at a cost that's ridiculously competitive these days, right? So that's not the difficult bit. The difficult bit is helping them figure out what they want to finance. We did a survey with SMEs to a relative size. And one of the things we realized was 76% of SMEs tell you we know sustainability is really important, right? About the same amount say financing is not an issue, right? A big part of them said, we know it's important, we can get the financing, we just don't know where to put the financing into yet. Because at the end of the day, when a company invests, there's a payback, there's a ROI, and if they invest in the wrong direction, right? Someone just made a really bad financial strategic investment decision, right? It's that uncertainty. So the more we can demystify and make it simple, what the concrete actions are, that's how we help our clients.
That's wonderful. Another financial sector, driver is insurance. We talk a lot about stranded assets or, the premiums going sky high, really hitting the bottom line. So, Brad, how would you advise, corporates that we can see that temperature has been going up and up and up. Heat is a real issue. So insured losses over the years has been going up also. So from just now you shared that how do you play the advisory role and how can you step up on that and also play the role of adaptation that help them to actually mobilize their resources to the right place, at least to make sure there's no stranded assets first.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think one thing to note is when we think about insurance, we've been using insurance for years. Insurance is already providing protection, and it's already providing protection in an environment where climate has already impacted us. Climate change hasn't started today, it's been going on for a number of years, and the insurance sector copes with that in terms of a mechanism. Things change within it to adapt, but it's fundamentally been there and it will be there in the long run. When we think about stranded assets, I think from a climate perspective, probably the biggest issue we have is around flood risk. So if you think of a place like Lismore in New South Wales, big floods in 2022 resulted in effectively large places that couldn't no longer get insurance and therefore can't get finance, which is a big fundamental issue. So the government has to step in and either help or do a buyback program. So that's a quick fire example of where you get stranded assets. If you think about the slow burn climate change over time, insurance tends to work on an annual basis. So the climate is kind of baked in over a period. But having said that, insurance companies are looking forward. They're fully aware. They're using data analytics. I showed a few examples of that to understand how their portfolio is going to change over time, what they want to invest into. And the biggest thing I think you can do as a buyer of insurance is to look at what risks do you have and where are things going to change for you. And then how can you articulate, because you understand those risks better than anyone else, you're on the ground, how can you articulate to the provider that you do have the right plans in place, or that the location that you have is not subject perhaps to something that has been said in terms of climate risk, or that you have a mitigation plan in place. Or if you're investing into the future, if you're a real estate group, if you're investing, or if you're a bank looking to understand your long-term portfolio, you can use the analytics and the tools to understand what you might be exposed to, or where you should not particularly invest into the future, what the opportunity and the risk is. So that's some of the areas that we would help out with.
At this point, may I know whether there is any questions from the audience? And yeah. Okay, I will ask one more question first. Put your thoughts together. Risk management is very, very important. Okay, so Prof, your center is looking at transparency, governance, and risk management as well. So you heard about from the financial, institutions, what they see, and we talk so much about reporting. So what do you see the importance of external assurance? And how do we give the peace of mind to board? Because SR is a board statement, so their reputation is at stake. So when they sign on, on the report, how can we give them the peace of mind to sleep better at night?
Well, I think I also don't have peace of mind thinking about this issue. But I think I want to move back. I think Eric just now deliberately avoided the word voting electorate. But there's something I really have to say, which is quite aligned with that. I think in Singapore, this sentence is always not good to have own self check own self. But I think moving to the investors and consumer side, I think that's the right word to use, consumers. So I think it's very important to have that credibility. And I think the last mile problem for many sustainable reporting is actually independent verification. And I think no matter how robust you do your internal review, how you can actually tell the whole world that your own house is actually very, very objective, very impartial, that optical effect of something internal is always hanging there. So I think going forward, and I think this is probably something that SGS RegCo is working towards, is ultimately, we actually have to move towards the external dimension, maybe Morgan can add as well. Even if it's a limited way, assurance have to type limited as well as reasonable. Limited means you have nothing to suspect in a negative sense. Reasonable means you're positively assured that something positive has happened. So I think going forward, even if we go to the limited way, I think Esther in your presentation and Michael, you alluded to that, I think we really need to move into the external realm. And in fact, I'm very, very proud to say my research center, CGS Center for Governance and Sustainability, is also in the business of external assurance.
Everybody hear that? Okay, since from point the arrow to Michael, what is your thought about external assurance? I know it is very difficult. Actually, at CDL, we spent quite a few months conducting the triology study, which actually provide very good direction for us to identify the issues that's most material to our company. The external assurance also, we have 4 sets. We have 2 moderate level already for GRI and SESG. For 2 sets is actually limited edition for audit for TCFD and CTSP. So how do you help to help company to make life a little bit easier for us, but it is still maintaining the robustness of our data and our credibility?
I think no one will dispute that external assurance will add credibility to your report. I think the question is really how much, when, and maybe who should do the assurance of that report, right? And on this, I think we've also set out a roadmap for how companies should be looking at the issue of assurance. 2021, we said that, look, maybe utilize the internal audit function to look at the sustainability reporting process, pick out the key issues that might be of note to the AC, to the board, and then leverage on internal resources to do some of these compliance check. When the Sustainability Reporting Assurance Advisory Committee was formed, and they recommended that we should really start looking at external assurance. But let's start with Scope 1 and Scope 2 assurance on a limited assurance basis first. So that's, I think, the most fundamental step, starting with climate, because that's most critical, but also Scope 1 and Scope 2 because it's within your control. You should have the data. And when we speak to some of these assurance providers, they've also said that these are probably the easiest parts to start with, Scope 1 and Scope 2 assurance on a limited basis. Thereafter, I think we should be looking at how companies are progressing. Already, even without an assurance mandate that we issue, right? We've seen that about 11% of companies are doing it on a voluntary basis. And a lot of them go beyond just looking at Scope 1 and Scope 2 assurance. Some of them even look at the entire report, right? But I would say that this is probably a roadmap that we will need to go on and to look at different areas to add on to the assurance in the face of the vision.
Wonderful. Actually, we only have a few minutes left for the panel discussion. Anyone want to, use this one questions from the audience? If not, I will take it. Oh, okay. Our director, Mr. Philip Lee. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to verify the timeline or the deadline for publication of the report. Understand that it should be published at the same time as the annual report. But based on your slide earlier, if external assurance is conducted, does it mean that we have more time to issue?
Yeah, so that's one area that we deviated from the ISSB to keep in line with the current practice. So if you do have an external assurance on your sustainability report, you can have up to 5 months to publish the sustainability report. But I would say that this is really out of line with where the international standards see us progressing to. They really want the information at the same time. So when we do look at assurance as a concept, as a mandate, I think we'll have to relook at that timeline. But in the meantime, I think encourage companies to look at how you can look through the processes to put information out together.
I see Esther leaning with me.
The global practices is always the same time. That's why CDL has been doing it on the same date. Annual report out with our sustainability report on the same day. Yeah, that's how we score better, right? Okay, so now I will. There's one more hand there. Yes.
You mentioned Esther about this TNFD, right? So isn't it for a country like Singapore, we are really challenging that like others need all that. Because we do lack all those. We lack the landmen be able to plot the response.
Actually, it's on the contrary. Singapore have more than 40% green coverage. and any industry has strong impact on nature. It's like it's actually a subject that we are going to conduct a workshop soon. It's a very new subject that everybody is sitting up to listen already. And in fact, apart from us, we have published a report. You can take a look at our report as well. Not too thick, just starting out with the local operation, and but we are going to expand it to cover New Zealand as well for this coming year. So whatever we do, there is an impact on nature, and similarly, nature also have an impact on our operations. So we have to look at the inside out and outside in as well. It's again very technical, so we've been taking a lead to do so. And in fact, UOB is also the first bank to actually pledge to support it. Maybe you see his mic is ready already. So
Such a good question. Can I jump in on this? So this is fascinating, right? So one of the things that's really important for us to understand as we look at TNFD reporting is we're trying to answer two questions. Number one, is our business model dependent on natural capital? Because it is very dependent, then there's a lot of business risk for us. The second question is, does our business model very negatively impact the ecosystem, right? And so, one of the very unique things in Singapore is we're actually extremely dependent because we're short on water, we're short on sand, right? The atmosphere is getting worse and worse, etc. But interestingly, there are a lot of national level governmental mitigants that then de-risk our dependency. So if you think about our water scarcity, the National Water Plan addresses a lot of that, right? The fact that we don't have a lot of land and sand, we have the largest sand reserves that have been built up that will last us, years, right? And so it is very interesting. Some of the things we think about nature, it looks intuitively like as it will be very vulnerable. But when you think about some of the capabilities that have been built to adapt to it, actually isn't so bad. Now we take Indonesia, right? Indonesia, everybody goes, oh my goodness, right? High risk, right? But the funny thing is that biodiversity is so rich, that natural capital is so rich, that the chances of a business model running out of natural capital is actually very low. But then what the risk is, because it's so rich, there's a lot of attention on protecting it. And so there's a lot of reputational risk that actually then comes in. In Singapore, there's very little true natural biodiversity or natural capital to protect already. You know what I mean? So it's very important, and I'm sure Esther and everyone who's working on this, it's important not to stay at the headline level, but we have to dive to where the real risk levers are to really understand what the nuances are. But it's a great question. I'm so glad it was on your radar screen.
I think we can do another session just on TNFD because there is a really close interdependence and connectivity. Yeah, so I think it is a real interesting subject. The chairman of TNFD task force will be here in November. So we are going to organize some things that, hopefully it's a very new subject. It's honestly not easy. Yeah, but it's a very important subject. So now we are running out of time and we just want to wrap it up with just one takeaway from all the speakers so that everyone can just remember one thing that, you can advise them to kickstart the journey.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it before. You know your risks probably better than anyone. So use that information and use what other knowledge you can gather on impacts from things like climate and help get ahead of the game in terms of from an insurance perspective. That's the one thing I always say. So that's how you can differentiate yourself.
Okay, Eric?
We use the philosophy of being progressive but pragmatic, and that keeps us in the sweet zone of not just staying with today's reality, but kind of pushing the envelope for 5 years, but then not doing stuff that really doesn't make sense even within that window. So progressive but pragmatic is how we go about it. Hope that's helpful for you.
Yean?
I'm going to sneak in two. So if you have any of your suppliers who wants to stay on your vendor roster and they don't know what to do, please send them our way. Yes, because it will help them get to their first step. And also the second thing is, if you want to influence our program so that it's more relevant to you, right? Because like I said, you guys are already a Queen Bee, but what we are training is actually what is supposed to be actionable and practical and pragmatic for the sector. Okay, so we're sector diagnostic in that program. So either way, we love to hear from you, from your perspective, what you need. And like I said, for your vendors, we can help them with what you need.
Thank you. Wonderful. Michael, one tip.
Say that a few conferences actually, which is really stay the course. It's going to be a lot of noise, new demands, new standards. But inside your trajectory, where you want to go, start small and then grow big.
Yes, Prof, you have the
Okay.
last word.
Okay, I think Esther, you started off with the 40 disclosure, digitalisation, decarbonization, defense, and I added a 50, which is distinction. So the last one I have to say is go for distinction. All the leaders here go for distinction, be distinctive, and maybe if I can borrow the acronym of CDL, all of you here is a company of distinctive leaders, CDL.
That is the best lines to wrap up today's discussion. Remember CDL? So anyway, thank you very much for the time. And now we have to ask our CEOs to come and thank our panelists. Just share a little bit of token of appreciation.
Thank you, Esther. And let us give our panelists another round of applause. Hi, Mr. Sherman Quek, Group CEO of CDL, to present a little token of appreciation to our speakers. The token of appreciation is an invitation to a dialogue between two legends of nature, Dr. Sylvia Earle and Dr. Jane Goodall, titled Hope and Harmony Between Nature and People, Blue and Green, on 8 December later this year. And for those speakers who are unable to attend the session, we will plant a couple of trees on behalf of each speaker. Thank you. Thank you. We would now like to invite all the panelists to join Mr. Quek and Ms. An for a group photo, please. Thank you, speakers. We would now like to invite Mr. Sherman Quek to deliver his closing remarks. Mr. Quek, please.
Okay, distinguished speakers, directors, management and colleagues, very good afternoon. I actually feel very nervous to give this closing speech because everyone was so lively, so impromptu, off the cuff, so I'm hiding behind this rostrum. I'm not going to walk the talk. But, really this was, I have to say, one of the best forums I think I've ever attended. We've held this for the last 11 years. This is the 12th one. This is the 11th one. So we've held it since 2014. So, but this really was sensational today. I mean, I have to say, our speakers were on top form. As always, we have Professor Lawrence, and he was just entertaining as always. And thank you for that new slogan you come up with for CDL. What was it? Company of distinguished leaders or distinctive leaders. Yeah. So thank you for that. So hopefully all of us go on to be good leaders here. But and thank you for remembering that video as well, because I recently, together with several of them here, we were all at the BT UOB Sustainability Impact Awards. So they made me come here and film a video. So I did speak about ESG, and I do think E is important, and that's what I mentioned in the video, right? I mean, without economic, there's no environment or social governance. If your company is not even profitable or making money, you won't be in business to do any of the rest. So E is absolutely important, and therefore you have to integrate sustainability with your core business itself. Of course, we also had Michael today, and we all need a lot of help on how to get up to speed on the listing requirements. and they are coming and coming fast, and there are changes all the time. So thank you, Michael. I mean, this was very helpful today. Eric, whom I also met that night at the Impact Awards, I had the pleasure of sitting next to Eric. I mean, I think you saw today, Eric is a fantastic speaker. His ability to really, break down things that are complex in nature, that are almost drive fear in you, right? Can I get my next loan? Am I going to get cut off by the banks? But he has the ability to, break it all down into simplistic terms and actually tell you not to worry. Here's how you move forward, in a sensible manner. What was it? Progressive but pragmatic, right? So thank you for that, Eric. Yean, what a fantastic, talk you gave today as well. Resonates a lot with me because I do come into contact very often with SMEs. Many of them are not from our industry, not from real estate industry. And it's been a little bit disheartening, because all these SMEs I meet, frequently they just tell me that they are usually either smaller RegCos or even private companies, and they'll be like, yeah, we're not going to bother. Trying to do our meet the requirements for sustainability reporting or trying to go green because we don't know what to do. And we don't think other SMEs are going to know what to do either. So heck it, I don't think let's just not bother. So that's the frequent feedback I get, from all this, but Yean, really encouraging to hear, and so I'm feeling more optimism today that I think what you've seen, the SMEs are, starting to step it up a bit more. I think it's not that they don't care, but I think sometimes they're just overwhelmed in this whole thing, and and I think there's lots of help available. Obviously, I'm really glad that you are providing this service as well to really try to help to get SMEs up to speed. Your service, is it more focused on the tech sector?
No, so
Sector agnostic, so even better, right? So if any SMEs need any help, or you can refer any of your suppliers, I think they will be a good stop. Recently, of course, I've also found out SBF, they're trying to do sustainability as a service, where they're trying to help SMEs to at least get to their first sustainability report, which in itself is a huge maze and nightmare for them. So very good, and very encouraged to hear that there's help on the way, more help on the way, because I really think that's what the whole landscape needs. Brad, very nice meeting you today, and certainly the last couple of years have been very worrisome for us from an insurance standpoint. We keep seeing our insurance premiums rise, and much of it is actually due to climate-related stuff, also because it's affected our global portfolio, whether you have natural disasters or other stuff. Of course, there's also the cybersecurity and D&O and other aspects of insurance, but climate has been a big influence on our negative influence on our premiums. So very good to hear from you today. I think how to approach this insurance equation, and hopefully I think all of us can have some useful takeaways from this. So after all, in this room, as you all know, we have the whole stable of Hong Kong group of companies. So real estate, there's finance, there's industrial, hospitality. So I think your advice has been very helpful from all five of you, because it transcends across industries and really helps us to figure out how we're going to come up with this game plan. Not even sure if I want to go through the rest of my speech, because it was when I prepared it, unfortunately I think I made it overly serious. But then, okay, maybe I'll just read parts of it. Okay, you don't need to hear all the stuff about sustainability becoming mainstream, all that I think everyone here knows. Time is ticking, and we all recognize the need to step up collective action to tackle the sobering reality that faces us and future generations. We talked about extreme weather events, past 9 years, warmest on record, insurance losses, we talked about that as well. I think I have this thing here where I put Swiss Re estimates that natural catastrophes will aggregate insured losses to more than 100 billion for this year. At least that's what they estimate. So these are big numbers, right? And as companies face an increasing number and intensity of climate-related risks, insurers are looking at tailored coverage, right, that supports the adoption of low-carbon technologies and guard against disruptions from extreme weather events. So we are trying to do our research and trying to ensure that we insure ourselves properly. And as many of you know, there's more probably specific to CDL, but the built environment accounts for approximately 40% of global emissions, and therefore that puts a lot of onus on us, and puts us in a heightened position of responsibility where we do have to play a strong role in driving change. We also talk about nature, nature-related disclosures. So nature and biodiversity loss, also a rising risk to our planet and to humanity. Its deep interconnectedness with the environment and economies cannot be ignored. As ecosystems degrade, our economic activities will be affected. Our supply chains, particularly from sectors which depend on nature, such as our food supplies, could face increasing and more severe disruptions. But actually, if you think about it, right, on an even more fundamental level, if you have disruptions, let's say nature-related, let's say animals or food supply, right? I mean, we can't even sustain ourselves as human beings, right? Much less talk about companies going on. So really this is something that's very important for us. But yes, Esther, I think you better organize a workshop, because the truth is when TNFD came out, nobody knew what it means or how to tackle it. So we may have made our first disclosure this year, but half the time I'm not even sure I fully understand the implications. Workshop will be good. I did, talk a little bit about reporting requirements in here. I mean, I think everyone already knows it, but in 2021, just to give some background, IFRS came up with established this ISSB, right, which was with the remit of developing a global baseline for sustainability-related financial disclosures. So their starting basis was integrated reporting, CDSB, SASB, SASB, and TCFD, right? And so they basically developed these reporting standards, published it in June last year, and became effective January this year. So now we have this IFRS S1 and S2, which Michael has elaborated on, and which is pretty scary for many of us, And I think often when I meet people, there's this misconception that, oh yeah, it's only us small companies that will struggle. You big companies, you have it all sorted out. It's not true. Okay, the pressure, I think the onus on us are actually very heavy as well. I mean, if you think about it, as a larger company, and actually the breadth and scale of our business is quite is sizable, and it transcends across geography. So for us to get our arms around reporting and also to get move towards our net zero targets is also very, very scary to use that word. I mean, so, I think, but the truth is we have no choice. I mean, I think we made, at least at CDL, we made our commitment towards our net zero targets. I fully agree with what Eric has said. Sorry, Esther, to say this, but I think the 2030 targets are just so difficult, and I don't want to use the word impossible, but I think it's really stretching. I mean, okay, let's put it this way, okay, so you'll feel happier. Not just for CDL, I'm talking about globally, right? Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about capping temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by 2030, I would say it's almost impossible at this stage. We just haven't done enough in the time that we've had, and it's too little, too late. But as this panelists have mentioned, and as Eric has also mentioned, I mean, let's look further ahead, right? Let's look towards 2050, right? Because there's not about one company meeting its goals, it's about the entire planet, about us trying to save the entire planet so future generations have a place to live. So doesn't mean we get complacent, but let's try to look further ahead, because otherwise the task becomes very impossible, very daunting, and very discouraging. But we will still try, Esther, okay? So I suppose, in closing, I think sustainability, embracing sustainability is not an option anymore. It is imperative for survival and growth, for all the things I mentioned. And all of us as respective leaders in our field, we really need to push forward, and we have the power, I think, to influence change and inspire others to follow suit. So let's push on, work towards a sustainable future where we respect humanity and nature, and preserve biodiversity, and hopefully leave a better future for generations to come. So again, I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation to all the attendees today from our different companies, as well as to our speakers who were so informative and entertaining at the same time. And just thank Professor Lawrence again. I mean, if you have any external assurance needs, please look for him. It's Center for Governance and Sustainability. Yeah. So, and let's all journey together, create a more sustainable planet. And of course, the last thanks I also need to give is to the CDL's sustainability as well as the corporate secretarial team. Both teams have worked very hard every year to arrange this annual forum. So thank you very much for arranging yet another very successful forum. So thank you, everyone.
Thank everyone for joining us at the 11th Hong Leong and CDL Group Annual Sustainability Forum 2024. It's indeed our pleasure to have everyone here today. Before we end, we would like to invite everybody to take a group photo together. So you don't have to move. Our photographer will be here. She's gonna go on a little step. So everybody, if you can just yeah, if you can, maybe you can wiggle your chair to the center so that you can all be in the photo together. Can we get the AV to switch off the lights, please? Can we switch off the lights on the left side? Okay, great.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Everyone look here. Okay, yes. Okay, smile. 1, 2, 3. Everyone do it. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Come on. Get ready, everyone smile.